I can
Do we
see
need to
my
cover up
face.
the brands?
I can't see my face.
I'm glad we have 12 minutes of this on tape. It's fantastic.
This is better than not having 12 minutes of
You were
this on
hamming
tape.
it up just for
Hey,
you.
oh, I want to remember my beer.
This makes editing easy.
I can't reach beer now.
Oh, you poor man. Here you go.
Now I need a bottle opener.
Welcome to the podcast. We are the Casual Fanatics, and this is the podcast where we take a pop culture question and we kind of go, what about this? This week's question is going to be all about, I have to check my notes.
Is that what I sound like, Paul?
This is my impression of Jeremy. Oh, yeah, it's what properties don't follow their own rules. And every time you see me look off to the side, it's me checking my notes to make sure I get my spiel right. But basically, we look at pop culture things that are happening and say, why aren't you following your own rules? And by the way, we're not going to get into Marvel. I know that's the most obvious one. You all are probably expecting us to talk about Marvel, but we feel like it's just too darn obvious. That's like saying, what's the best selling book of all time? Well, it's the Bible. Let's talk about the second one then. I know this is a little bit of a weird start to the podcast.
Dan Brown's.
Say what?
Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code.
Da Vinci Code. Yeah, it's not even remotely close, by the way. The Gideons have him beat really well. So we're going to talk about properties that violate their own rules. It's things that have been burning in the back of our brains. We're going to each come up with an example to support our argument. We'll go through the examples, discuss them, and at the end, we'll pick which example, which one of us brought up, is the best one, and kind of pick a winner for whoever actually came up with the best one to support whatever it is that we're talking about today. So there's no prize except for the glory, I guess, of being the best podcaster.
Bragging rights.
I might have to make a trophy or something at some point, I guess. Maybe one of you guys can take one of my guitars home or something. Not a good one, though. So this week, again, we're talking about what properties don't follow their own rules. And my example for this is... Oh, and I probably should mention who we are. I'm Paul Stadden. This is Sydnee Johnson, and that's Jeremy Brazil. It's probably good to mention names because there's nothing like getting halfway through a podcast and being like, who's talking? My example for the
Gotta remember, there's
signs.
a vocal thing too, you know.
We should have like this little
It's not all video.
diamonds above our heads.
I know, right?
So my example for the property that does not follow its own rules is Back to the Future Part 2.
I'm going to be that person real quick. Do you want to start the timer?
Do I want to start the timer? Oh, yeah, we should. Because here's the thing.
Because we will talk all night.
For like 9 hours. Let me get the timer up.
There's no actual limit. We just like to make sure that we don't end up talking for 10 hours.
We literally could, we'll go off on tangents. We're all ADD, so we'll follow the butterfly wherever it flies. My example is Back to the Future Part 2, because I think most time travel stories don't obey their own rules. And now the Back to the Future Part 1 and 3, I think, are fine. But Back to the Future Part 2 is particularly galling, and I think the best example of a frustrating, does not follow its own rules time travel story of all of them. And the thing is that really frustrates me is it's my favorite of the trilogy. But Back to the Future Part 1 is fine because Marty McFly goes back in time and he can't get back to the present because there's something stopping him. It's not like the time machine can just, whenever he wants, just get in the time machine, go to the future. It's run out of the plutonium that will actually power it. So they have this imposed time limit. He's got to get to the clock tower. It makes sense. I get it. He's got that one shot to travel back to the future. Back to the Future Part 3. Again, makes sense. The DeLorean's out of gas. They have to get it up to 88 miles per hour. They had that one shot to travel through time. I'll buy it. I'll give them that, even though they could still, if they wanted to, say, okay, well, when I get back, I will then come back to this particular point in time with the DeLorean, and I won't have to go through all these shenanigans. I mean, you can sidestep it a million different ways, but I'm still going to allow them that. But Back to the Future Part 2. Back to the Future Part 2, that DeLorean works fine all the time. And what do they keep doing throughout the movie? They give themselves these stupid 10-minute windows of like, yeah, of course, we'll drop her off on her porch. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you go there during the daytime? You have a time machine. Why on earth are you going back to the dance where Biff is trying to get with Marty's mom? Why don't you go back like 4 days and get the book from Biff, or like slash Biff's tires? You can do anything you want with this perfectly working flying DeLorean. And the best you can think of is, we'll go back to, I'll get the book back from the Undersea Dance. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever because there is no limit. You can put trash into the little Mr. Fusion. You can fly. You can literally do everything you want with this time machine. And yet they do nothing with it. All the rules of a Back to the Future, everything is riding on this one moment to get back, is completely thrown out the window with Back to the Future Part 2. And it makes no freaking sense.
He puts his glass down and takes a swig.
I rest my case.
All right.
Bob Zemeckis, the next move's on you.
I don't have one of those gavels.
I know you don't. I know
You don't have a gavel.
Okay, but thoughts.
I don't even know where. Okay, so as not a Back to the Future fan, and I don't think I've watched the movies in like literal ages. So, like,
You got the gist.
yeah, I get the gist. I know the gist of the story. Like, I've seen them years ago. Are they literally self-imposed time limits though? Like, this is the harebrained plan that like we're gonna go back to this moment.
Oh yeah,
and like they make so
in Back to the Future Part 2, there is no time limit on anything. They can take that DeLorean, and once they figure out the future screwed up, they can go back to whenever they want.
And they just pick the worst timing.
They pick the worst time. Like, instead of Marty going back and telling himself to not buy the almanac, instead they go try to stop Biff, the super strong bully who keeps trying to kill Marty. Why would you even interact with him? Why would you bother?
Just avoid it altogether.
Just avoid it altogether.
So I have a problem in general with time travel. I hate time travel in pretty much everything I've ever seen it in.
It's too convenient.
It's too convenient. It's too easy of a trump card to use.
Yeah.
It never works. It always creates more problems.
Yes.
And it just leads to worse plot points down the road.
Yes.
So I'm with you, and I love that this is a series literally based around time travel, which is a thing that I hate. But
That's fair.
But I'm kind of with you. I'm like, if you have time travel, it's too convenient, and that's the whole problem with time travel.
Yeah.
Is it's too convenient to simply sideswipe all of the problems. Think about if you've been a fan of anything for any period of time. Like, I go back to like when I was like in my teens, and you would watch a show or a movie or something, and you're like, well, wait, why didn't they just do that? And like, that would have fixed all the things I don't like about it. Like,
everything.
you can figure out by going back in time how to fix pretty much anything you don't like about a situation.
Exactly.
Like, ignoring obviously like things like the butterfly effect. Like,
yes.
obviously like you would create something
So
else.
let me state the rules of a good Back to the Future movie. Is you have to have something that inhibits you from being able to travel through time, and the whole plot has to resolve around the tension regarding you have one shot to travel through time. That's the only way you can make time travel interesting. You got this one shot.
You have to impose limits on it.
Because
otherwise it's a perfect fix.
Otherwise, and that's why in the Harry Potter movies, when they use the time travel thing, like I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the books they kind of explain that you can only use this thing once, or there's a limit on it.
In the books, it's a very limited, like who's allowed to use this type of magic. So like when Hermione Granger has it, she like literally is not allowed to use it for any other purpose other than go to her other classes.
She's supposed to use it to get classes, and that's the only reason she has it. So the other thing is, it doesn't limit you. It does limit you a specific amount of time, I think, based on how many times you turn it.
Right.
But also there are other rules because of all of the like apparent like red tape you have to go through to get a time turner. Like there are other rules, like you can't let anybody see both of you at the same time. You can't see yourself because of all the problems that it can cause.
Right.
So it comes with like a list of rules that you must abide by.
And I think that's actually good. That's kind of like they've seen the problem with time travel and they try to mitigate it. But in Back to the Future, you have a really good plot device with the first and the third where you have this limiting factor. You can only travel through time once. You got one shot, and that's what creates the inherent tension of a story.
Yes.
That's the rule for a good Back to the Future movie. When you get rid of that and you allow yourself to travel through time whenever you want, it's then you're limited by the incompetence of the characters.
Do you know what?
It's frustrating.
Do you know what the best Back to the Future movie was?
What?
Futurama. You had the episode.
I feel like this is a
Oswell.
Oh no!
That in Roswell, when they go back to Roswell.
Ah, yes.
And Fry becomes his own grandpa.
Ah, yes. And my favorite moment when in 1947, Bender falls out of the ship and they lose his head, and like, oh no, he's trapped in the past, and they realize, oh, we can go get him, so he's been in the desert for like 1,000 years. And they come again like, Bender, are you okay? He's like, well, actually, I was having a pretty good time until you guys showed up. So if you use, and I think in a comedy, I give it a lot more leeway when there's dumb stuff done with time travel. But Back to the Future is supposed to be a serious time travel movie, and I'll forgive Marty being an idiot. He's 17. I mean, I remember being 17. I did not make fantastic decisions. I did not think things through. I get it. Doc Brown is a scientist who created time travel, and he thinks of none of this.
It's wonderful.
Bullcrap. It's all the rules of a good Back to the Future movie. All the rules are thrown out the window for what you should and can do with time travel. It's the most frustrating thing to me. And I love Back to the Future Part 2 because it's a blast. They go to the future. They have the dystopic present. It's actually a lot of fun. It's just that it's the most problematic and the most frustrating.
And having said that, like, I hate time travel and those things, I even don't like where they eventually ended up taking time travel in Harry Potter. I think, like, okay, for a fix for how they used it, like, I get it, but I really wish they'd have left it out. I think it causes more problems than it fixes. Always in plot. In plot, it causes more problems than it fixes for the writers.
Yeah.
In this specific instance where we're talking about a movie that literally revolves around time travel, the only successful way to do it is to impose the right set of rules on yourself.
Yes.
And for literally the time travel movie, we're talking about Back to the Future, the time travel movie series, to break its own rules is kind of an abject failure.
It is. And that's why it's so frustrating that Back to the Future Part 2 is otherwise a good movie, because movie makers are so good at kind of making you forget about poor decisions or these kinds of rule-breaking things.
Do that kind of things
upon a first viewing, because the first time you watch Back to the Future Part 2 is like, oh my gosh, he only has so much time. He's got to race back here. He's got to get here, and you're just like you're in the tension of it. And then later you're thinking, he has a time machine.
It's like in a horror movie. It's like he just ran upstairs.
But up
the stairs.
But when you're watching, you're like, oh my gosh, he's going up the stairs.
I know.
No.
I'm gonna be real. Like, you're a horror movie fan, and I'm always the one who's like, that idiot. Like, why would you do that? Like,
well, to be fair, that's my favorite genre, but I hate most horror movies.
Because what they do is they go for the cheap thing. That's what frustrated me about Prometheus. Like, they went for the cheap. Like, these are scientists who know what they're doing, and he's sticking his hand in the alien mouth. Like, okay, I guess.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Won't she run left or right? I mean, yeah. I mean, better people than I have talked about Prometheus for the last decade.
I'm gonna take my helmet off.
Yeah.
In this unknown atmosphere and this live fauna that's around me, I don't know what these spores will do to me.
That needs to be a whole episode. Bad decisions in horror movies.
Bad decisions in horror movies. Oh,
bad decisions in horror movies.
That'd be a series. That's the name of the podcast. So
we'll condense it.
We'll have to condense it. But so there you go. Back to the Future.
Starting a new podcast, guys.
Back to the Future Part 2, violating the rules of not only just a good Back to the Future movie, and it's violating all time travel rules that should ever be set down. Incredibly frustrating.
I don't think I can argue with you at all on that. Like, there's not even really much debate about it. It's a bad decision.
It's a bad decision.
It's bad writing decisions.
All right, so rule breaking example. Sydney, what's your example of the thing that violates its rules?
So my example of the thing that violates its rules is something that is very near and dear to me.
Yeah.
But I hate. Like, I love and I both love it and hate it. So my example is Dragon Ball Z. Now, you've watched the original Dragon Ball Z, the series. You have not.
Yes, I have.
You have not. You've watched a bridge.
No, and I've watched portions of the original Dragon.
And gave up.
When it was on Cartoon Network, the problem is that when you're watching it on network TV and you have to wait for a new episode to come out, and you keep catching the ones where nothing happens.
That was my childhood.
Yep.
My entire middle school life.
Though I made sure, absolutely sure, I stayed for every episode near the end of Frieza because I had to see the transformation. I was not going to miss it.
I have a comment about that later. I'll come back to that topic, Jeremy.
But Dragon Ball Z.
My problem with it and the rules that it breaks, and they're rampant. They literally just break themselves on repeat. The whole show is just a cycle of these two problems. And the first problem is that they can't. And I'm going to leave out Dragon Ball because I'm not as big of a fan of Dragon Ball. I was introduced to Dragon Ball Z. a lot of this was set up in Dragon Ball. But anyway, the main rule that they break blatantly is the fact that you supposedly, like, you have the dragon that grants wishes. You can be wished back to life, but only once.
Right.
And at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, they're kind of in that situation where I believe they wish Goku back the first time, but then you can't wish him back again.
Right.
Well, their very obvious solution to this problem is, oh wait, there's more Dragon Balls in the universe. We'll just travel and go get another set of Dragon Balls and use those Dragon Balls. That's how they do it the first time.
Oh my gosh.
So then later on in the series, this happens. It keeps happening.
Oh, I know. Goku dies a lot.
He dies a lot.
A lot. He's the greatest fighter in the universe, but he keeps dying.
All the characters die a lot. And most of the characters die a lot. Not all, but most of the characters die a lot.
Yeah, Chi-Chi never dies.
Chi-Chi doesn't die. But then they get a new Guardian of Earth at one point, which means there's a new set of Dragon Balls and therefore a new dragon, and therefore you can be wished back again.
That's such a cop-out.
And that's why, like, you watched Abridged, and that's why the joke about, like, hey, next time I get a free sundae.
Yes, yes. Okay, this makes sense now.
Is so much more entertaining. Because
Muffin button.
Full disclosure, like, I went back, I watched it, obviously growing up, and I went back and tried to watch it as an adult. It is a hard slog. Like, I love the series, but it is a hard slog.
Yeah.
The battle you're talking about, the battle with Frieza at the end of Saga 2 Season 3, I don't know where they exactly have them cut.
2-season saga.
It's a 2-season saga, but the battle with Frieza at the end, I literally played it one time because I'll watch TV in the background of my house when I'm working, and because I work from home most of the time. I turned it on. It ran for 2 days. Like, I went to sleep and got up. They were still in the same phase of the fight. That happened.
Yep.
So it's a long slog.
Yeah.
Of course, it came out of an era where we had a lot of filler episodes and things like that, and that was the way they did anime.
It was the Japanese anime Game of Thrones.
It was worse than Game of Thrones.
It was kept coming out before the comics weren't keeping up.
It's so strange.
Yes.
It's so strange that they have animation down to be so efficient in Japan that they can produce the animation quicker than they can produce a comic.
They do it like in the West. We always record the voices first, and then we animate over top of what the voice actors do to give it a more natural feel, because you want to get the best acting. In Japan, they animate everything and then tell the voice actors to go just talk over whatever they did, which is insane.
Somehow it works.
I don't know how they can do that. And they were like Katsuhiro Otomo and doing Akira and really like big budget ones. They would not do it that way. But your Dragon Ball Z, your average. That's why we always make fun of how the mouths move in anime.
You can put anything over it.
You put whatever over it.
You can literally put anything over it.
It also makes translating to the West a lot easier because you don't have to worry about lip movements.
Makes parodies a lot easier.
Makes parodies a lot easier.
But my other big issue, and the other rule that they consistently break, is this kind of way that they've handled, we've reached, the epitome. Originally, Super Saiyan was supposed to be like the thing. It was the thing no one could obtain.
Oh, yeah.
We passed the numbers. We're into like colors now. All of us, we've gone from like, there's a new Super Saiyan form to like, all right, this again. Like, there's no, and what it's done is it's trapped the writers in a corner.
Yeah.
There's no real interesting plot development in that way, because like literally every season we get a stronger enemy and we find a new form of Super Saiyan that we didn't know existed.
That's why the Garlic Jr. saga was one of my favorites. It was like
because there was none of that.
Goku was out of the equation and they had to fight this immortal weakling,
So that's funny. So I thought you were a Goku fan.
I like Goku.
Okay, you like Goku.
But it's like, while I like Goku, I love a good story. The most interesting
season is still the one where Goku's not.
Yeah, amazing. Not in it. Yeah,
we all like, it's like I like Back to the Future Part 2, but it's terrible. Like we all like the things that just, and then we're like, but I'm glad it's gone. So,
but I think those two, they just. There are many rules that the series breaks on itself all the time, blatantly. But those are the two main ones that really make it a slog to watch. It really kind of damages the plot of the show over time. I'll be real, like I'll still go back every now and then and turn on the first couple seasons. After that, like it loses all interest. There's no real reason to get invested in these characters. There's no consequences.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, is if you die, there is not a consequence. This is not Walking Dead.
Right.
Where the character is gone.
No.
This is not Game of Thrones that will kill the person you love.
No.
Like,
pick a character.
They'll be back.
You can like whoever you want because they'll be there for 9 seasons.
They'll be there, even if you don't like them that much.
Yeah, especially if you don't like them
Jon
that much.
Snow with Game of Thrones, right?
Except for the villains. Yeah, and my other problem.
Even the villains get brought back sometimes.
They do.
Like
my
Garlic
problem with Dragon
Jr.
Ball Z, you talk about rule breaking, and you do keep having to get stronger villains, but they keep saying like, "Oh, this is the strongest villain in the universe.
This is the strongest one ever.
Frieza's the strongest villain." But then Trunks will come and just kill him in like 2 seconds, and like, "Hey, there's this really strong android out there." I'm like, "Whoa, you just killed? What the hell? He was the strongest being in the universe." And then Trunks is like, yeah, well, I just killed him. Whatever. Okay, so
Moving on.
There's this android, and I'm like, what?
Now training montage, and like that's the cycle. That's just the constant cycle.
That's why they had to leave in-universe beings and go to gods.
Now we're
in the multiverse.
Now we're in the multiverse
and everything like that.
And it's just oh god.
It's like broken promises.
It really is.
It's like, no, really. There's no one stronger. We promise you. Oh, Majin Buu. Okay, this time, pinky swear. No one stronger.
That cat-looking guy.
Yeah.
You have to fight bubblegum, sentient bubblegum.
That's basically what they did.
That's Boo.
That was basically Boo.
Freaking, and people are like, "I like Dragon Ball Z." Like, I don't know. I don't know why I don't like it.
I want a Dragon Ball Z spin-off series called Basically Boo now.
Please no.
Boo.
No. And the real problem that I have with this whole thing, like we can joke all we want, and it's a lovable, terrible series.
And we will.
If you grew up with it, it's a nostalgia bomb. At its core, it's hard. It's like you watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the other day. Like I have to, even as a fan, I have to fess up. Like it's not great. Much as I love it. My problem with it is, and I know you and I have had way longer in-depth discussions about this, there's a lot there. Like there's the potential for a ton. Like I feel like as an HBO live action series, this show would be great.
Right.
There's a lot of room for character development. There's a lot of room for like cultural things that they never touch on. It's like
they had to dumb it down for kids.
They did.
And then you can't really deal with the really interesting aspects of like time travel, like Trunks going back in time, meeting his parents, but not having to reveal that they're his parents. You have so much deep, dark stuff. Goku being from this warrior race that he doesn't want to kill his adopted parents. It is, I don't know, it's Japanese Superman, I know. But it's dealing with these dark subjects, but never really gets to deal with it. Like Piccolo is now his friend. Like Piccolo was the main enemy.
All the enemies are now, like, well, not all, that's not true, but like,
even Frieza started becoming a friend.
Right? Like Vegeta was the one that blew my mind the most because I came into Dragon Ball Z. I did not see Dragon Ball. I came into Dragon Ball Z, so I just like Piccolo was just like, oh yeah, Piccolo's there.
Piccolo's Piccolo.
You know, but then you go back and watch Dragon Ball and like, oh, he's the villain. But then I saw the transformation of Vegeta, like where he was like then like why is it, like you see like a later episode like you missed a bunch and then you're like they're friends now.
Oh yeah, if you missed like half a season, you were very confused.
Very weird.
If you got grounded,
Bulma got married.
If you got grounded in middle school, you could be very confused.
Yes. So strange.
But taking that, like, I mean, look at the plot development that could be, and this is what frustrates me about the rules the show insists on breaking, which ruins its plot, is that Vegeta basically is a child soldier in an army, not even on his own planet in his own culture. Yeah. He's a child soldier in Frieza's army. Like, I feel like there's some PTSD there.
There is.
You know, there's so much, and he has really the best character arc, in my opinion. Vegeta? I think he has the most character development as far as changing over the course of time. And I think that's why people like him and identify with him. I
agree. And it's not even that he necessarily becomes a good guy. Mm. He's not a good guy. Like, he's still Vegeta. But it's fascinating that he's fighting on that side because it keeps his motivations interesting because you're always questioning where he's going to fall. And I kind of like characters like that. Mm-hmm. I feel like sometimes they're used as a cop-out that you can kind of go wherever you want, wherever the writers are feeling that day. But it's also a fascinating exploration of human emotion about how we are so dual-minded a lot of times, and Vegeta's a really fascinating exploration of that, and he's better one.
Also one of the few characters in the show I feel like they don't really break their rules with, like he pretty much stays true to his character.
Yeah.
I mean, Goku's over there, I don't know, doing what? Goku's
doing Goku stuff.
Doing Goku stuff.
Being Clark
Superman.
Kent in Japan.
I'm not a Goku fan, obviously. Can't stand. I think the whole show would be better without Goku.
I think he's just so goofy. It's like whenever you have like this weird character of just a super strong, like immensely powerful person who's also just really goofy.
Well, and the thing is, his whole motivation is much like all Saiyans. Like it's just the biggest fight, the best fight he can have.
Yeah.
Which once again, like culturally, I feel like would be something really interesting to touch on in this show if it were a like smarter version of itself.
And if you could deal with the relationship problems with him and Chi-Chi, it would be, and him being a dad to Gohan, because
or not,
because Gohan's half human, so he has a lot of the human emotions in him, and you can really deal with it interestingly that way. But he also has the half Saiyan, so he's probably divided about how he feels about Goku being gone all the time. Where he gets it on one hand, but on the other hand, like, I would like you to be there, Dad.
How many times did he have to mourn the death of his dad?
A lot.
But then, again, in this universe, do you really mourn anybody? It's like in Futurama. When somebody dies, it's become a head in a jar anyway, so whatever.
You know, at that point, they think it's final, but we know it's called dramatic irony, because we know, the audience knows he's coming back.
Well, it should never be more exciting for the characters in the thing than it is for the people watching it in that respect, because we just are sitting like, oh, they're just going to bring him back. Okay, where's the tension for us?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
and there is none. There is none at this point in the series. Like I tried to watch Super, and I really fell off of it. Not too. I mean, I watched a good bit of it, but I couldn't get interested, because at this point, there is no tension. There is nothing to root for anymore. I don't feel like. I pretty much watch it for what little character development there is.
Ain't a lot.
Mostly Vegeta. You know, just to see what he's doing today. But the thing about it is, like, the thing that bothers me about this show is, like, if they would not break those two basic rules that they set these rules for themselves.
They did. They're their own rules.
You can only be brought back to life one time.
That sets up some great tension. Who will be brought back once?
I would be okay with one time. But the problem is, because they've just waylaid those things, you can't, they don't give themselves room to write character development arcs. How do you deal with loss? Because there is no dealing with any consequence for anything. If Goku loses a fight, oh well, like, we'll bring him back.
Yeah, that's why I actually kind of like the decision in retrospect for Han Solo dying in Episode 7. Spoiler alert. It's been 5 years. You have no excuses. But it's actually how final that was. Like, oh, they guys stabbed him. Well, they could bring him back. Oh, he falls down that chasm. Well, I guess he could still be okay. Oh, they blew up the planet. Huh. Yeah, I guess probably. But it's permadeath, and it makes it, in a world of so many properties that just don't care, that will just bring anybody back as long as they're profitable, it's kind of refreshing to see that. And Dragon Ball Z, this is the other problem I had. Not only did you not have anything happen for a long time, but you break your rules of tension. You break them all the time.
It was literally, it's literally the antithesis of things like The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And I you probably have a better scope of reference for this than I do, but I don't feel like until shows like The Walking Dead, like Game of Thrones, which were relatively recent, did we really have that, oh, they will kill anyone.
Yeah.
Like, you used to, like, some characters would die, but, like, the main characters were always okay.
They're fine.
Walking Dead hit the scene. Game of Thrones hit the scene. Everyone was fair game.
Those are the two big ones. Because up until that point, a character would only go away if the actor had a dispute with the series. Like, you have David Duchovny leaving X-Files.
They would die off screen.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you have these characters that would go, or the show is, or Michael Scott, the character leading The Office. You know, so you have all these kind of characters that would go away. I know a lot about that series, way more than I want to. But you have they would go away only because, the actor was leaving, or there's a pay dispute, or, ratings are dropping and they need to make a change, something like that. But with The Walking Dead, I mean, it's whoever, whenever. Game of Thrones, whoever, whenever.
I think you get a call on The Walking Dead. Like, they used to say you'd get a call and you knew, like, you were getting cut. Like,
right.
Like,
sorry, you die.
And it does give the series a finite lifespan if you can't keep coming up with new interesting characters. I think Walking Dead did it really well for a while.
Mm-hmm. For a while.
for a while where they would get somebody new and be like, oh, that's a cool character. Kind of hope they stick around. Oh, he's dead.
Maybe not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, never mind. And same thing with Game of Thrones. That's an interesting tension you can keep going for a long time. So, all right. So, Dragon Ball Z, really good. I think a really good example. Jeremy, what's your property that violates its own rules?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit different direction. I kind of brought up last week the whole idea of things breaking its own rules and how it's a bad thing.
Yeah, It Follows being your example.
Yeah, It Follows. But this week, I already talked about It Follows. I don't need to bring it up again.
Fair enough.
So why not bring a little twist to this and say, hey, breaking your own rules doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Okay.
My example this week.
It follows the rules.
But
crap. You want to ballast that like stand there, buddy? Here.
Oh no!
Oh my gosh!
Disaster!
It's chaos! Ah!
I didn't do anything. This is Jeremy.
Everything is wrong.
Everything is awful.
Everything is falling apart. All right.
My knee.
I know you guys have a band, but that does not advertisement for it.
All right.
We're not the singers.
No, we are not. All right.
Thank God.
We're going to need some editing right there, Paul.
No, we're not.
No, we're not.
It's staying in there.
Great.
Oh, dang.
All right. What's your example of a good thing?
He's like, I wouldn't
All
have
right.
sang.
Well, right before everything went wrong, I was about to bring up the example of The Simpsons.
All right.
The Simpsons break their own rules all the time.
That's true.
All right. So, it's right in my face now.
That may or may not have been necessary. You'll never
May
know. I'm the sound
or
guy.
may not. Yes.
Simpsons break their own rules all the time.
All right. So after that little hiatus, let me get my brain back on track. All right. So when breaking rules, typically it annoys the audiences because the world is trying to keep a semblance of its own rules. The Simpsons takes that opposite philosophy from episode to episode. It establishes its own new rules.
Granted.
So, where do we see this? All right. So first off, there are a couple of established rules that they'll never break.
Okay.
There's two that they both involve Lisa Simpson.
Okay.
One is Lisa is a vegetarian. There's an episode in season 7, Lisa the Vegetarian, where she becomes a vegetarian, and they got a little man named Paul McCartney to be a guest star for this episode. And he gave one condition, and that condition was, hey, if I'm on this episode, Lisa has to stay a vegetarian for the rest of the run of the show. Now, the other one is if there's an episode where Lisa and Homer are in conflict and Homer does something mean to Lisa or something, they have to reconcile by the end of the episode. That's a rule that was established by Yeardley Smith, who is the voice of Lisa. Yeah. It's like she won't do the voice of the character if they are not getting along by the end of the episode. Yeah, correct. So it was like, doesn't matter if Homer beats up Bart all he wants.
Chokes him.
Yeah, exactly. But with Lisa, they always have to reconcile. There's a special relationship, and because of this rule, because Yeardley stood strong on this idea, you have some of the best Simpsons moments of all time. We can get into that another time, but let's get into...
So 2 unbreakable rules.
Those are the 2 unbreakables.
All right.
Now, after that, you start building up canon. Most shows, even serialized shows, try to play along with the canon that they've established. Like Friends, you'll have relationships that last more than one episode.
Sorry, stimulus response.
Yeah, I'm not saying Friends is a good example, but you have shows that establish little rules in between episodes, even if each episode is its own contained thing. Mm-hmm. Simpsons doesn't do that. From episode to episode, it establishes its own new canon. For example, take Moe's Tavern. And Moe's Tavern's in Lisa's saxophone episode, where you learn where she got her saxophone. Moe's Tavern is downtown.
Right.
And next to it is the music store. And Homer is walking by. For the convenience of the story, this location is right next to Moe's bar. So he walks by the bar and he's going to go inside. But he knows, oh gosh, Lisa is a gifted child. And they told me music is a way to help a gifted child. And I can't afford to put her into the special school. So do I go in, get air conditioning, get a drink, or do I go in and buy this saxophone? Of course, he chooses to buy the saxophone. But in the movie, go to 20 years in the future. Yeah, the Simpsons movie. For the convenience of the joke, Moe's Tavern is placed next to the church. So as soon as the dome is dropped on top of the town, everybody starts panicking. So all the people getting drunk in the middle of the day run over to the church to get saved. And all the people at church run over to the bar to get drunk. All for the convenience of the joke. So this idea of breaking your own rules is within the show to strengthen the storytelling and to strengthen the jokes for each episode. They want to make each episode as strong as it can be. So, a great example of them pointing this whole idea out and just making fun of themselves for it is like they don't pretend that they're not breaking these rules or anything like that. They embrace the idea of it as well. So they just jump in, and there's an episode called Homer's Enemy. It's in season 8, and there's a character named Frank Grimes.
Oh, gosh.
Frank Grimes.
Oh, poor Frank.
Poor Frank, yes. If to let y'all know, eventually you see his tombstone, They kind of bring that up.
It's dark. It's a dark episode.
It's a dark ending to that episode. But there's a point in the show where, Homer wants Frank to like him because everybody likes Homer, But for some reason, Frank doesn't. So he invites him over and is trying to get him to have dinner with him. He gets there and sees lobster on the table and things like that. And it's like, hey, do you want to take a look around the house? And they point out a few things that happened in the past. Let me see. What are all those little things that happened in the past? First, he had met Gerald Ford. He had George Bush as a neighbor. He toured with Smashing Pumpkins as a carny. He's been to space. He's even won a Grammy. All these things are ridiculous for one man to have lived out in that short of period of time he has existed.
And this is in season 8, which was 22 seasons ago.
22
worth
seasons
of stuff
ago.
for Homer
Yes.
to have done.
Oh, yeah. This show is over 30 years old now. So, yeah. So you have all these little things that is pointing out. It's like, it would be ridiculous if these are things that we took into account every single episode. So, another thing, breaking its own rules has given The Simpsons the ability to do is modernize.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, what do I mean by that? They're able to know.
Continue long past its prime.
What do you think I mean by that? Huh? What do I think?
I thought it was rhetorical there for a second, but then he's like, no, finish my point for me.
Please, I forgot where I was going.
I'm reading notes and I don't know what's happening.
Sorry.
Yeah, boy.
Really poignant for a second.
So, big thing about that. It's like, okay, I brought up he won a Grammy. That episode took place in the 90s. The era was the 80s when he was an established man. he was already a man, and he was a part of a barbershop quartet.
The B Sharps.
The B Sharps, exactly. Baby. Oh, I won't sing. I'm gonna.
we could do most of the song.
God.
Oh, gosh. You and you. You.
Get a guitar and I'll allow it.
All right.
Okay.
So I bring that up because approximately 15 years later or so, I forgot exactly how long, they have an episode called That 90s Show, where he is a young adult in the 90s. Because this is 15, 20 years later after that 90s episode. And you need to establish where he was at that age. Because he's never aged throughout episode 1 to episode 800 some odd now.
Yeah.
So, in that episode, he's a young man, and he is the inventor of grunge music.
Oh my god!
And there's a guy watching him on stage, and it turns out to be, oh, that's Kurt Cobain watching him and stuff like that. So it allows them to modernize what they're presenting on the screens. Like he's this age, so this type of culture influenced him at this age.
Yeah, and it's funny that they reference the age issue. There was a Treehouse of Horror episode. I want to say it was season 25 or 26, where Sideshow Bob says, "Finally, after 24 years, I've managed to kill that 10-year-old boy." Wait, what?
That's exactly another example of them not following their own rules within canon. Because guess what? They've had birthday episodes. Like Maggie turns 1. There's that episode.
Here's the episode that we shall not speak of. Disney has removed from Disney Plus, and we can never ever acknowledge exists. The Lisa birthday episode.
Lisa, it's your birthday.
Yeah,
Happy
because it's Michael Jackson.
Birthday, Lisa. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's
wasn't
not on
on
Disney Plus. It is. As far as Disney concerns, that episode does not exist.
I love that episode.
It's a great episode. Michael Jackson plays the crazy guy in the asylum. Oh my gosh!
But does not sing the song, by the way.
No, he does not. It's an impersonator. It was the weird. Why? He didn't want to do it.
He did the voice under the condition. He didn't sing the song.
Oh my gosh!
That's just so strange.
Right. So.
All right, well, then I have a question about all this and how we're kind of categorizing all these things. Does intentionally breaking your own rules, does that violate the spirit of the question, or is that along the lines? I mean, I guess I allowed it earlier, so...
It's your fault.
I mean, it is my fault. It is my fault.
Well, that's why I had to bring up this whole idea. Because we look back at this... Because they've been doing it for 30 years, and now it's normal.
Yeah.
So the idea that they did it in the first place,
it's established that you're allowed to break it.
It became a rule that they were allowed to break it. There's no better example of this idea of being special than the fact you brought it up, Treehouse of Horrors.
Yeah.
Like, what other type of show breaks all the conventions and all the stylings of their entire show? Once every season, at least, they have a special with 3 one-act stories in which it can break the setting, it can break conventions of those characters, and guess what? I say there's 2 hard, fast rules. Well, technically, there's another hard, fast rule that none of the core characters can die. But guess what? Treehouse of Horrors, you can break that one hard, fast rule where core characters can die. It took a long time for them to finally kill one of the main Simpsons core.
Yeah.
In a Treehouse of Horror. It took until season 8.
Yeah, it took a long time.
It was 7 or 8. But it was the one with where groundskeeper Willie kept dying.
Yes. Do not touch Willie. Good advice.
Yeah. But yeah, that
was actually really good.
They had core. They had they had that core rule, but allowed this little side thing that they do every single year to break one of those core rules.
Yeah. And it's interesting, going back and watching the first couple Treehouse of Horrors, they're not as good as the later ones. It really hit its stride about season 3 or 4.
Oh,
so,
yeah, absolutely. So except for the Raven. The Raven was phenomenal.
Okay, the Raven portion of the very first episode. That was the very first one.
Yep.
So All right. So there's something about this question that we're asking about what violates its own rules, and coming with the best example. I almost feel like it is two different kinds of questions because, do you win based on the fact that you have this thing that does violate its own rules so often and so well to a good effect, or do you rate this by something unintentionally just through either laziness, poor writing. Violate.
It's always poor writing.
It's always poor writing. Violating, and then you have larger concepts like time travel being at stake here, with this thing that inherently, unless you treat it properly, is so easy to cause you to break rules.
Yeah.
You have to treat time travel as such kid gloves. And you have, I think it's interesting because you both have series that ran really long times. They're
both still
rules.
running.
Your
technically.
concept
Still running.
broke one movie. My concept broke a whole series.
Right. And the thing is, I think it broke your series irreparably.
It has.
I think that, honestly, if we're going for a winner here, as much as I love my own example, and I think we all love our own examples, I might have to vote Dragon Ball Z just because I think that it breaks the show. Simpsons is so enjoyable. Even 30 years on, you can still get a lot out of The Simpsons. It's still a fun show to watch.
Still a fun show to watch. It's out of
I'm
its...
just now watching it.
Oh, snap.
Hey! Discomfort
Heck
zone?
yeah.
You too. No.
Oh, yeah.
Just talking about it. I'm like, I should probably watch this
Probably a good
30-year-old series.
It's
One
a
of
good
my
idea.
If you needed advice,
lot of
what
cultural
episodes to watch?
references.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Family Guy is famous for all the cultural references, but,
gosh.
Simpsons is where it's at.
Simpsons is where it's at. And
But anyway, back to what you're
But
saying.
I think the thing is that The Simpsons is so good, and the thing is that even you have the rule breaking, and it helps it, and it makes it work. And I like The Simpsons, and I feel like awarding this to something that has absolutely been damaged by breaking its own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And Dragon Ball Z, I still like Back to the Future Part 2. I still love The Simpsons, but Dragon Ball Z, to me, the rule breaking made it interminably boring. And that
makes it very hard to watch.
And it made it hard to watch. I think I have to personally. I got to cast my vote to Dragon Ball Z. I don't know. And where do you guys fall?
I'm obviously voting for me.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, 2 out of 3, but fine. But Jeremy,
here's where I come down on all of this. It's The Simpsons established the idea, and it's one of the few shows to this day that does consistently not follow its own canon and its own rules, and it continues to push forward with that because not even Groening's other shows did that. Futurama was very consistent with its canon. Of course, it broke it every once in a while, but it tried hard to have a consistent story.
Almost doesn't even have a canon.
It doesn't. It seriously
there almost
doesn't.
is no canon.
Yeah, they only bring up canon like Armin Tanzarian because to make a joke out of it.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is. Every episode is its own contained thing to make it as good as it can be, and
except for that episode.
Yeah, except for that episode. Yeah. Well, that's probably as good as that episode could have been. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So, but with all that said, it is more fun to think about what is broken. Yeah. So I'm going to vote for DBZ as well.
Yay.
Okay. Sydney won. It's the most broken series we can.
It really is. And actually, I'll work, if we have a minute, I'll work another thing into your point. Because something I thought about earlier, but I didn't know if we were going to have time for. We talk about time travel and having consequences. You have to have rules for time travel. So one thing that actually I feel like Star Wars of all things did pretty well, that Dragon Ball Z just irreparably, I was a fan of Star Wars around the same time that I was watching Dragon Ball Z originally. I used to be a Star Wars fan. So in Star Wars, to destroy a planet takes a considerable amount of work.
It does.
They built a mechanism ship.
Yeah, a Death
Station
Star,
thing.
if you want to refer to it that way.
Yes, and they built literally a gigantic device that you have to power. It takes a lot of people to run. You all have to push the buttons and turn the keys at the same time.
Yeah.
There's only one weak point. And it has to power up and recharge in the early movies, from what I remember. So
Correct.
Destroying a planet was a big ordeal. In this show, once again, power being shifting constantly. You can destroy a planet on a whim, and there's no consequences even for using that much power or that much energy.
Yeah.
Just really, like, no one set rules.
Bringing up Death Stars, and then Episode 9, pretty much every single destroyer has its own mini Death Star array on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So essentially it turned into DBZ at that point, is what you're saying.
We even did that.
Dragon Ball Z.
At least they started with a rule. We were just like, Frieza doesn't like the Saiyans now. Let's flick our finger and like, the planet's gone.
So
that was it. Like,
well, Piccolo destroyed the moon. The moon.
No consequence.
Nothing. Tides are fine. Like Earth's fine. Like what's?
We just want to stop one thing that happens once a month. We'll destroy a rock. Like,
single-handedly, he takes care of werewolves forever. But yeah,
I forgot.
I like that.
Yeah. So every time I think about Dragon Ball Z, now I think
you
this
stuck
is why
on that scene.
It's true. It's him destroying the moon,
Oh,
and everybody's
God.
just like, I destroyed the moon. Oh, okay. Like, and just the more I think about Dragon Ball Z, the more I think it is the perfect example of this breaking its own rules so constantly with zero consequences. Nothing. So Sydnee wins this week. If you agree with us that we A, picked the best examples for this particular topic, and B, picked the winner for this topic, let us know. We would actually really like to hear from you. So
I think we'd get good enough examples. We could do follow-ups.
And we could do follow-ups. I would love
some questions.
I'd love to do a listener episode of your examples. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Until next time, stay casual fanatics. I am Paul Stadden, Sydney Johnson. That's Jeremy Brazell. We're the Casual Fanatics.
Ciao.
Bye.